Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Business and Travel Podcast. My name is Jackson Dean, and today on the show we have Sharine Duran, who is the founder and CEO of Adzurra, which is a fashion app that is available on iOS and Android devices around the world. You can see and find out more information on adzurra.com. As always, this podcast is supported and sponsored by socialgrowthmedia.com, which is the home of Instagram marketing. And in today's episode, we are going to be going through Sharine's story, background story from her going from the corporate life, a background in international relations and finance, to dropping it all and starting her very first startup. We go through a few of the tips and tricks behind the way that she has raised quite a lot of money for this company. And at the end of the episode, you'll find out exactly how much that was. She also goes through a little bit about how you can start designing your own app and the process that you go through for designing apps, and how to hire and outsource to different software developers, either in your own country or overseas. So plenty up ahead in this episode. Without any further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Sharine Duran, who's one of our very valued clients here at Social Growth Media. And we've done some amazing work together. Really looking forward to her big launch party coming up for Adzurra, and plenty of things ahead. So guys, I'd like to give you a warm introduction to Sharine Duran, and I'll hand it over to you now.
Thanks, Jackson. Yes, it's a pleasure to be here for this podcast. I've gone through a lot of ups and downs with my startup, so it's great to be able to share this with everyone who's listening, as well as, I guess, just talk to you about my experiences with, especially with marketing, advertising, which is a new beast that I had to conquer since I have no experience in that area. I graduated law and international relations from Bond University on the Gold Coast, so very much of a corporate background. And after I actually graduated from law school, I went straight into finance, which is something a little bit different to what obviously I'm doing right now. I was working for a bankruptcy firm.
Yep.
And basically, which is great. So I can, file my own bankruptcy if I ever could. But yeah, so I guess I always just had an interest in business, but like everybody else out there who do want to dabble into a business, they don't really know where to start. And that's the same thing for me. I'm 23 years old now, but when I graduated, I was 21. I had 2 degrees and really didn't fit within the legal field, nor the government policy and international relations, which was my second degree field. And I didn't want to go into DFAT or the government area. So when I graduated, I didn't really know where I was going. I just kind of just took a job with a digital marketing company.
Yep.
And after that, I dabbled a little bit with digital marketing, a bit of advertising, a little sales experience, which I obviously had no experience in, since I was also at the same time doing my training to become a lawyer.
Yep.
Which I never finished, by the way, which is another story in itself. But basically, I really did like marketing and advertising, but I never really thought that I would want to get into a business where we focus solely on marketing and advertising. I wanted to create something that was a little bit more broad in the sense. So after around, 8 months of working in the financial field, in bankruptcy specifically, I knew that I did not want to continue in the corporate lifestyle. Pretty early on, within 4 months of working full-time, which was my first full-time job after university. And after 4 months, I guess, that's when I started with Adzurra, or thinking about the designs for Adzurra, which was something a little bit more different, and honestly did not know where to go into the business tech field. And
so where did you originally come up with the idea?
Like the date, or
like where were you, and like what were you thinking about, and how did you come up with the original first version of what Adzurra was going to be?
Yeah, so there has been many versions of Adzurra in the last year and a half. So I guess when I first started, it honestly came back to, so I was working in that financial firm on the Gold Coast for around 4 months, and that was 4 months of full-time work. So from a university student to go into full-time work, it's quite different and alarming to be honest, because when you're at university, you get to choose your own hours and you have 2 hours of work in the morning, maybe to go to university lecture. And then you have the day free and then maybe another 2 hours in the afternoon. So working full time where you know that 8 to 5 is spaced out is a different experience. And within 4 months of knowing that my 8 to 5 p.m. time was basically going to be blocked out for full-time work, I knew I just had to get out of that corporate lifestyle.
Yeah.
I didn't like knowing that there was my hour or per hour time was quantified by a specific number. That's the biggest thing for me at that time. So to be honest, I guess I started Adzurra because I hated the lifestyle I had when I was working full-time for a corporate company. Obviously, I work more hours now than I ever did before.
Yeah.
But it's on my terms.
Yeah.
So I guess that's different. But I guess I started Adzurra when, so 4 months within the financial field, I had booked a trip to Greece and to Europe for 4 weeks. Actually, it was 4 weeks, but I could have extended for a long period of time. And that's when I was looking for, funnily enough, it was Brazilian bikinis. So for anyone who's listening out there, Brazilian bikinis were the constant trend 2 years ago, still today in the fashion world. And I wanted to find these Brazilian bikinis that were really popular on Instagram, just like any 21-year-old at the time.
Yeah.
And I was looking through Instagram and I realized that the actual stores that were popular within the community of Instagram, as well as actually the world, weren't the stores that you would find at the shopping centers or on Google. It was actually the stores that were trending highly on Instagram. So e-commerce boutiques, basically. Yeah. And when I knew that, I was quite baffled to know that there was no one platform where you could find trending e-commerce stores online. So you had to either find, keywords, SEO keywords that these e-commerce stores were using to see which ones would actually pop out, or go with the e-commerce stores that everyone knows about, like Showpo and Meshki. So either you choose those big e-commerce stores that you want to shop at, or you just go on Google and see what you find. So I guess when I was looking for Brazilian bikinis, I wanted one platform to show me, okay, these are all the stores trending on Instagram.
Yep.
This is all of the stores that can actually supply Brazilian bikinis. And I wanted to even narrow it down even more and say, these are the stores in their Instagram profiles, because Instagram profiles now it is so important for branding purposes. Most people, when they look at or find a store or come across a store on Google, they'll immediately go onto their Instagram.
Yeah.
Even if they go towards their e-commerce store, they will always check their Instagram. Yeah. Everyone will always check Instagram first. And that's something I do, and I know a lot of people in terms of our users do, is your Instagram is your profile. Like, that is your identity in the entire e-commerce space. So I'm only talking about e-commerce. I'm not sure in other spaces, but in e-commerce, your Instagram is your profile. It's how people keep up to date with your current trends, current fashion, your new looks, your lookbooks, everything. So I wanted a platform that showed all the different types of e-commerce stores that were trending with the Instagram all attached to it, as well as showed, which Brazilian bikinis were available. And so after that, when I found out, there was no app or platform that allowed for that, I kind of thought of creating it myself, because if there's nothing there, then you have to create it. So I honestly built Adzurra, or the first version of Adzurra, to serve my own need
Which is the best kind of business to build when you're trying to fix a problem that you are trying to fix yourself.
Exactly. So I had a need, and then I was freshly out of uni. So I was still living in university housing. So like with roommates and everything. And so I obviously knocked on my friend's door, who's also a big e-commerce purchaser.
Yeah.
And like any person out there, when you have an idea, you run it by other people. And so I knocked on my friend's door and I asked her, what do you think about this idea? You know, one platform where you could find all the e-commerce trending boutiques and find what their best sellers are. And with just a click of a button, you can find, you know, bikini, Brazilian bikini, and all the different e-commerce stores that can provide a Brazilian bikini.
Yeah.
And she said that was a great idea because she was heading to Japan only a few months later, and she had a problem with trying to find trending e-commerce stores that supplied streetwear clothes. So she wasn't looking for bikinis, but she was looking for streetwear.
Yeah.
So she was like, well, that would save me, you know, going through YouTube stories, YouTube videos of influencers promoting streetwear brands, save me reading through blogs about streetwear brands as well, and going through, trolling through Instagram to see what's trending and not. And when she basically gave me the green light saying that's a great idea, I thought about it more and more. And that idea was fueled even more because I hated the lifestyle I was in at that point in time as well.
Yeah. So how did you start building the actual platform or the app at the time?
So after the idea I dabbled in a bit of design. I never knew I could design before. So as I said previously, I came from a legal and international relations background.
Yeah.
And we don't do any design in those degrees.
Oh, and side note, before I forget, tell us about what your boss used to ban you from when you were at that firm because they were suspicious you were working too much on this idea.
Yeah, so basically it's a funny story. So when you first have an idea, you're extremely positive about the idea, as you would be. And I took it on a quite serious level. At the start, it's an idea. But then when I started designing and realizing the potential it could have for a global network of brands and users, I obviously started researching on how to start a startup. I had no idea how to start a startup. I had a legal and international relations background, no business acumen whatsoever.
Yeah.
And I would obviously research during my time at work because of the fact that I work quite long hours. And, well, like any business owner, when you're first starting, you are so invested in work, making it work. So you do 14 to 15-hour days just to get it off the ground. And so what happened really is that I was researching so heavily whilst at work that my boss was quite getting suspicious that I obviously was spending too much time, which was the truth. I was spending a bit of time on it. However, I was still getting my work done. I still did the amount of bankruptcies I needed to do. So he banned me from reading the financial review during work hours because that was obviously not for their business purposes.
Yeah.
So I was banned from the financial review because I was taking business too seriously at that point and I was learning new things. I was banned from researching anything to do with startups or businesses during my time at that corporate firm. I was banned from researching anything to do with improving technology or any articles about technology. So, and obviously I was banned from many
pretty much everything except the work in front of you.
Yeah, so I was banned from a lot of things. And that's what happens when you're first starting out, is you're so invested in trying to learn about your company and making it work that obviously don't try and not do a better job what we have. I was doing a great job and maintaining my job whilst I was doing that on the side. But there comes some negatives with that, and I just got banned from anything to do with improving my business, or improving not even my business, because I didn't have a business at that point, but improving my intelligence in business. And that's one of the things that you'll just hit amongst your journey in business, is that there are people who will try and prevent you from excelling, and you just kind of have to hit that barrier down.
Take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
So what's your experience been like when it comes to, say, starting the business and working at the same time versus working on the business by yourself full time? What's been better? What's been the differences? And what would you recommend to anyone that's, say, looking to start a business that's currently in a corporate job? Would you recommend dropping the corporate job, going full time into the business, or trying to juggle both at the same time? Or what are the pros and cons, do you think?
So my opinion in this situation is that every situation is different. So what I did was that I went into a corporate firm, and then I also put my startup as a side job, I guess. Not really a job. It wasn't making any money, but we're not making any money right now. But basically, in terms of a side job, what I mean is that it was kind of like I put 4 hours of my night every night to building and designing this prototype, since obviously we're an app, and working full time. And that worked well until it wasn't working at all, because obviously your boss gets suspicious, and as rightly so they should. They want you to obviously focus on your work, but you just can't, because if you're extremely invested in making a business work, it is impossible not to think about it 24 hours every day.
Yeah.
I remember when I was starting out, I would dream about my business and my prototype and design. The only thing was probably I wasn't saying it out loud was what I was dreaming, but I was thinking about it 24 hours a day, thinking about design, user experience. So it is so hard to manage a job as well as your startup, but I think it might also be foolish depending on your circumstances. So if you have a lot of money backing you up already, so I probably would say, okay, leave your corporate job and go into a startup. However, I didn't have that opportunity. I had to raise funds first. And to raise funds, as everyone who's raised funds before will say, that it is one of the most difficult processes to go through.
Yeah.
And that's only when, I guess you say, if you have the funds, I would say go into your startup. There's nothing stopping you except for yourself and taking that plunge, because it's hard to let go of security into abyss of darkness, which is what I think a startup sometimes can feel like.
Yeah.
And that's when I would say, like, leave your job. But if you don't have the money like I did, I would highly suggest working 8 hours a day full time, and then putting your startup on top of that and just working 14-hour days until you can raise the funds and then go to your startup. And it's a good process as well, because it gives you good organizational skills, which is what I found. You'll also feel much more motivated to leave your job when you have something more to look forward to. And you don't take that experience lightly. You know how it is to work 14-hour days, but working 14-hour days for your startup is completely different to working 8-hour days for someone else and then 4 hours for your startup, because there's not enough time to put into your startup, but you're putting more time into something you don't even love. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. So run us through, okay, so you've got the idea and you've gone out, you started sort of putting the designs together and so forth. At what point did you feel like you had enough to go to an investor, and walk us through your experience in raising the money that you did?
Sure. So my designs firstly came from a software. It's a free software. So if anyone wants to do any type of wireframing, which is obviously the first process that you do when it comes to an app, you have to design it, which is your wireframes. You can go onto a site called like Mockups, and they're a free software site online that you can basically show what your design would look like if it was an app. So you just draw it online. It's pretty easy. So if I can use it, definitely everyone can use it. And there's just pages of different designs of how your app would function and where the smallest points of your app you could make money or you could monetize. So I did that for 2 days. I worked hard on trying to get these designs. And once I got those designs on board in mock-ups, I pitched it. I called every developer on the Gold Coast, since I was living on the Gold Coast at the time. And I called every developer, which was like 7. There wasn't a lot on the Gold Coast. And one developer came back and said they would be happy to meet me and discuss my prototype. So I went to go see this developer and I showed them my mock-up designs, and they were extremely happy to know that this was an actual design, because there's a lot of people that go there with no designs at all to a developer and says, I have an idea, can you guys create this for me? Whereas I had already taken the plunge to design it myself and then go to the developer. And so I had already these designs, and the developer was like, well, we'll be happy, we can make this. And I think it would be profitable in the future. However, you need to raise investment. And that was the first time I was ever exposed to this idea of raising investment. I didn't even know that was an idea, that you could just raise money.
Yeah.
Because at that point, I went to a developer and I had a bit of savings in my bank account. So I just thought that, my $12,000 savings was enough to fund this app, until my developer was like, that's going to probably cost you a minimum of $50,000.
Right.
And
how did that feel?
I was just like, $50,000, so my $12,000 wasn't going to go too far.
Yeah.
And so that's your minimum, I would say, in terms of creating a good, substantial app, is around $50,000.
Yeah.
Unless you can do a deal with your developer where you give a bit of equity. And it might be cheaper, or they would do it for free. It's very seldom that they'll ever do it for free, because it is just an idea and we don't even know if it's profitable. Nothing in a startup you really know is profitable. You just give it a go.
Yeah.
But in this case, you can basically negotiate with the developer and see what type of contract you can come to. Anyway, so when I found out it was a $50,000, I looked at that and was like, well, my next mission is to raise some money.
Yeah.
And that's when I approached the investor, when I had a developer on board who was willing to create the designs I had, who knew how to create it as well. That's very important when you're choosing a developer. You need to know that they have the skill to develop something like yours, because it's different when you're developing an app for a business that's already in place, because your systems, your back end, and your database is already there. It's completely different when you're building an app based on a design that's out of thin air.
Yeah.
So those are 2 different ways that you can approach an app. And
so how would you look for a developer? Like, what sort of tips do you have for people that are looking for developers that sort of meet the standards of what you need?
Sure. So it's different, because in every different city you have more opportunities in some cities. So if you're a startup wanting to start in Silicon Valley, you're going to find more developers.
More expensive developers. More
expensive developers, but developers that would have higher abilities to create something new and brand new. Whereas on the Gold Coast, if anyone's listening to this who's not from the Gold Coast, is a very small city on the coast of Australia. And so we have professionals in accounting, like lawyers, but we don't have tech, as you know.
Yeah.
So it was pretty hard. I was extremely limited to choose a developer. And when you're starting out, you want a developer that you can see. You don't really want to just completely go outsource quickly, because you can't trust and you don't know the methods of creating a startup. And outsourcing is obviously the cheapest way of creating something in technology. But obviously with outsourcing, you minimize your control over the app. You don't know the code quality. You can't rely on them hitting deadlines, because it's just you telling the outsource team. And if you don't have a proper project manager in place, then you don't know if your app's ever going to get built. So it's extremely important when you go choose a developer that you know that they have the proper skill to execute your app design if you've designed it, or you choose a developer that you can trust.
Yeah, definitely. So off the topic of development, more back onto the investment, how much did you raise and how did you go about doing that?
Yeah, so after I had the design and a developer in place to say, yes, we will build it, then I was off to looking for investment. And how I raised my investment was I was actually I don't know if it's lucky or just hard work, but within the month of having an idea and my designs, I already had a potential lead for an investor.
Yeah.
And so that within that month, that was July 2016? 17. Yeah, so last year, July 2017. Within that month, with that lead, the lead that I had was actually, I was just babysitting for my uncle one day in Brisbane. And I was babysitting, I came over, and my uncle was on the phone to a friend that he knew was quite well off. I didn't know that he was quite well off. And I said, I was just playing with the kids, and the friend just heard me in the background saying, oh, to my uncle, like, who's that? And my uncle just said it was his niece, just babysitting the kids. And he asked, what my background was. And I just said, I was like in law and finance. And I had a business idea. And so he just said, I'll just put her on the phone. And so I was on the phone and I pitched him my idea within, I think it was like a minute pitch.
Yeah.
I just said, this is what I had. It was completely an idea with a few mock-up designs I did for free online and a developer who thinks he can create it.
Yeah.
So I said, I've got a developer on board who wants to create it, or he can. I have designs that I know that I can execute, and this is how I intend to make or monetize the app itself. And with those 3 questions really and 3 things ticked off, he just said he was willing to invest and would like to meet with me. And he was from Canberra at that point. And he said that he'll give me a call in the next few weeks to set up a meeting. So this was not a guarantee or anything. This was I'll set up a call in a few weeks. You don't know how long a few weeks could be, a year, 2 weeks, 5 weeks. And he said that he'll set up a call. So I was like, okay, great. And he said, this is my email if you want to reach me. I was like, great. So that was like a 2-minute phone call tops. And I just went back to babysitting. And the next 3 weeks, I remember I was heading to Europe. And whilst I was at Europe, the investor emailed me and he said, I would like to meet with you. I'm in Brisbane for these 3 hours or something. Can you get down? And I was in Europe at this point.
Yeah.
So he said that, he can meet with me here. And I didn't know if he was going to invest. It could just be a meeting that didn't really matter at all, or it could be a meeting that changed my life. And whilst I was at Europe, he said that he wants to meet me at this date. So I just flew back.
Which is a pretty significant risk. And if anyone knows me, I'm an avid traveler and there's nothing I would give up than to travel the world. So this was something that I forfeited quite significantly in order to try and pursue this startup that I had nothing or no experience in and no real design in, to meet with this investor that could potentially just, was like, it's not for me, which is fair. So I just flew back. I took the day off from work and went down to Brisbane to meet with my potential investor. And when I pitched him the idea, and I had a pitch deck at this point. Yeah.
So a pitch deck, if anyone's listening, is something that you should really create at the start of your business. When you're starting a startup, it basically just gives the investor an idea of what your design is, who your target market is, who demographic, how you would monetize the app, what your designs are, a bit of research in that specific field that you're trying to enter, and which was fashion for me.
Yeah.
Users within that specific field, or how many people purchase clothes every day, things like that, as well as your 3-year projection cost. And so I came back and I showed him my pitch deck, which was half finished at that point.
Right.
And my computer actually broke down during that meeting. So it actually froze. So I didn't even get to see him the pitch deck.
Wow.
Show him the pitch deck, sorry. And so after that, he just was like, don't worry about the pitch deck. Just let me know how you would monetize this app. And I told him how I would and what I see the app going to. And at that point, he didn't really ask questions. This was my first meeting. It was the weirdest investment meeting because there was no questions he asked. He just let me talk for like 45 minutes.
Yeah, right.
It was a very uncomfortable meeting.
Yeah.
Because I was trying to see what he wanted to know, and he didn't really give me any indications of what he wanted to know. He just wanted me to speak about the app and how I would monetize it. And my developer was there as well to give any type of technical support in terms of how to build it and everything. And after that, he was like, it's a great idea. I'm definitely interested. He shook my hand and nothing else really happened.
Right.
And then 2 days later, he gave me a call. He's like, I haven't forgotten about you. I like to invest. And that's when we started discussing equity and management of the business. And that was my first round of investment to build the app.
So you had a 2-minute meeting, babysitting, and you found the investor. You got an email. You flew back from Europe to then attend a meeting where you were going to pitch him. Your computer froze. You didn't get to even show him the pitch deck. You then did a 45-minute talking head sort of chat with him. 2 days later, you get an email to say that he's going to invest in you. And how much did you raise?
That point, I raised $35,000.
Okay. And so was that enough to do at least your first stage of what you had in mind?
Yes. So the $35,000 was our first round, and my investor at that point said he would like to invest more, but at this point in time, he just would like to raise the $35,000 because that was how much the app developer was willing to charge. Was charging us to develop the first prototype of Adzurra.
So how quickly did you burn through 35 grand in a business?
2 days.
And what did you get achieved in 2 days?
I paid the developer. I paid the developer within 2 days, the 35 grand, and went straight to the developer. It was literally in my bank account for like 2 days. So I was not revenue, but I had money in my account to negative again.
Yeah.
And for 6 months or 4 months, that's how it was.
Yeah.
Oh, there was a bit of spending money there for marketing purposes where I dabbled in a bit of marketing, but that was about it.
Lived off 2-minute noodles.
Yeah. Well, the point was about that situation as well, as I still was working full time.
Okay. Right.
So after I'd raised the investment for my first round of investment, I still continued to work full time with that $35,000. I paid my developer to build the first prototype, and I continued with design in my spare time whilst I was working full time.
Right.
And that's when, within those 4 months, I really got to, with that $35,000, that's when I was like, okay, I have to actually design something proper. And I paid a graphic designer with a bit of my money and developers' money to design the actual prototype that's better than the mock-ups I had.
Yeah.
And that's what I gave to the developer to continue building. And for 4 months, so around August to like November, that's what we did. It was just design, pure design and pure app development.
Yeah. And so then you've sort of got it to the point where you've got your version 1 of the app, your prototype and all of that's finished. What was the process of raising the second round?
The funniest thing is that, so in November last year, so I was ready to this point where our app was not in the slightest finished, but we had a design up online and we did our first beta testing.
Yeah.
So what we wanted to do to make sure, because it's a new idea, so it's not an idea based on another app or anything like that. It was a completely new idea, fresh new idea. We needed to make sure that the market actually wanted the prototype that we were building, because there's no point of creating an app if users don't want to download it, or if your clientele or your target market to go on the app don't think it's even valued within that space.
Yeah.
So in November, I did my first beta testing. And I basically went to the Village Markets, which is a fashion market here on the Gold Coast. And I showed them the prototype that we had at this point and what our vision was. And at that point, I had a friend with me who is now my business manager and the head of the Australian division. And he was walking with me through the Village Markets, and we had an iPad. And just bits and pieces of this design that the developer was working on. And we said, this is what we want to show. And Adzurra version 1 is nothing compared to what we have now.
Yeah, obviously.
Very different, extremely different. Even the design's completely different. And so we went to these village market fashion stores and we asked them, would you value something like this to get more users or more customers come through to your e-commerce store or through your bricks and mortar store? And all of them were saying that this was a great idea and they needed something like this, apart from, you know, the generic places that you can advertise, which is Facebook, Instagram, Google, things like that.
Yeah.
And so we did our first beta testing and we had around 14 brands that we had gone through to talk about that and about our app. And after that, we got and collated back the information and the feedback that we received, and I put into a spreadsheet, I remember that, and said, okay, this is what people want to see, this is what people want to edit out of the app. They actually think this is a much more valued feature than the other one. And so after our beta testing of the version 1, that's when we started working on the version 2 of Adzurra based on our first market feedback. And we did 3 beta testings before we actually even finished off our design.
At that point, you sort of knew how much you needed to continue the app or to the next stage.
Yes. So before I raised my second round of investment, I actually did 2 beta testing.
Yeah. So how much did you successfully raise in that second round?
I raised $250,000.
Okay. So we're going to cut it short there for this particular episode. In the next episode, we're going to go through how you spent that $250,000 or how you're currently spending it, allocating it. That was a really good background story of sort of Sharine's story and going from the corporate to the startup life. And, you know, how to sort of start designing your app and a few little things there. But in the next episode, and this is why you're going to want to stay tuned, we're going to go through Sharine's journey ahead, which is tackling Silicon Valley, Tel Aviv, Israel with the Australian landing pad, raising another round potentially in the future, which is probably ahead, and some big tips on when you raise that much money, what you really have to do to deploy it the right way the first time. We're going to be going through one of her big marketing campaigns where we had over 60 influencers attend her launch party across the world. We had international reach across the world on all of those influencers. So plenty up next in the next episode. I want to say thank you to Sharine for coming on, but stay tuned, guys. We've got a whole nother episode coming up, and that'll be next week, and we will see you then.